What began as a routine promotional interview turned to one of television's most explosive confrontations when Matt Damon walked off The Late Show with Stephen Colbert after being publicly humiliated over past controversies, igniting outrage across social media. From the moment Colbert emerged from behind his desk for the opening monologue, however, something felt different. His usual playful demeanor carried a sharp edge that longtime audience members hadn't seen before. The jokes landed harder, the political commentary cut deeper. Backstage, staffers exchanged glances, sensing their boss was in a particularly combative mood. When Damon was introduced and stepped out to thunderous applause, the audience had no idea they were about to witness television history. The actor smiled broadly, waving as he took his seat across from Colbert's desk. The opening pleasantries felt routine, enough talk of Damon's new film, a recent family vacation, the familiar Hollywood small talk that fills the first minutes of any late-night interview. "So, Matt, great to have you back," Colbert began, his trademark grin spreading across his face. "It's been, what, almost 2 years since you were last here. A lot has happened since then." There was something in his tone that made Damon shift slightly in his chair, though he maintained his professional composure. "Yeah, it's good to be back, Stephen. Always enjoyed coming on the show," Damon replied, settling into the guest chair. The audience applauded again, clearly pleased to see the beloved actor. Colbert leaned forward, fingers steepled on the desk. "You know, I was thinking about our last conversation, and it got me wondering about something. You've had quite the journey over the past few years, haven't you? Some might say a bit of a bumpy ride." His smile never wavered, but his eyes had grown sharper, more calculating. Damon's publicity-trained instincts kicked in. "Well, you know, it's been a learning experience, like it is for everyone. I think that's what life is about, growing, evolving, trying to be better." It was a diplomatic, non-committal response, the kind celebrities give when they sense a potential trap. "Learning experience," Colbert repeated, nodding slowly. "That's one way to put it, though I think some people might use stronger language to describe your various, shall we call them, educational moments." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the audience as the shift in tone became clear. The camera caught Damon's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Years of media training had prepared him for hostile interviews, but something about Colbert's approach felt especially calculated. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, Stephen," Damon said carefully. Colbert's grin widened. "Oh, come on, Matt. We're all friends here. I'm talking about your comments on diversity in Hollywood. Your views on the Me Too movement, that whole situation with your Cambridge neighbor. You've had quite a track record of stepping in it, haven't you?" His tone remained conversational, almost friendly, which only made the words cut deeper. The studio fell silent. This was no playful ribbing. Even the cameras seemed to move closer, sensing the tension. Damon's media handlers in the wings exchanged uneasy looks. "I think that's a pretty unfair characterization," Damon replied, his voice steady, though a slight edge crept in. "I've always tried to be honest about my experiences and my perspective. And yes, sometimes I've said things that could have been better articulated, but I've also tried to listen and learn from those conversations." Colbert chuckled, without warmth. "Listen and learn. That's the celebrity handbook response, isn't it? But here's what I find interesting, Matt. You keep finding yourself in these situations where you need to listen and learn. At what point do we acknowledge that maybe the problem isn't just poor articulation?" The question hung in the air. Damon's hands, resting casually on the armrests, tightened. Backstage, his publicist whispered urgently into her phone, trying to determine whether the interview could be cut short. "I think that's a pretty loaded question, Stephen," Damon said, his charm beginning to crack. "And frankly, I'm not sure what you're hoping to accomplish here." "What I'm hoping to accomplish," Colbert replied, leaning back with theatrical casualness, "is maybe some actual honesty for once. You've built this image as Hollywood's everyman, the guy from Cambridge who stayed grounded despite the fame. But your actions over the years suggest something different, don't they? The studio grew so quiet that the hum of the cameras was audible. Audience members no longer knew whether to laugh, applaud, or simply watch in stunned silence. This had moved far beyond the usual celebrity roasting that defined Colbert's show. Damon's face flushed slightly. When he spoke again, his voice carried a warning. I think you need to be very careful about what you're implying here, Stephen. Colbert's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise, his performance perfectly calibrated. Careful. Oh, Matt, I'm just asking questions. Isn't that what journalists do? He gestured toward the audience with a theatrical flourish. These good people deserve to know who they're applauding for, don't you think? The calculated cruelty in Colbert's tone was unmistakable now. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing they were witnessing something that had crossed the line from entertainment into genuine hostility. The show's producers frantically signaled from the wings, but Colbert seemed determined to ignore them. You want to talk journalism? Damon shot back, his composure finally beginning to crack. Then let's talk about your responsibility as a host. You invited me here under the pretense of discussing my work, and instead you're ambushing me with some kind of character assassination. Character assassination? Colbert laughed, though it sounded hollow in the tense studio. I'm literally just repeating things you've said publicly. If that feels like character assassination, maybe the problem isn't with me. His smile had turned predatory, like a shark sensing blood in the water. Damon leaned forward, his voice dropping into a more serious register. You know what, Stephen? I've been doing this for 30 years. I've sat through hostile interviews, dealt with tabloid nonsense, weathered every kind of media storm you can imagine. But this, he gestured between them, this is just cruel for the sake of being cruel. Cruel. Colbert's voice rose slightly, and for the first time, genuine emotion seemed to break through his calculated performance. You want to talk about cruel? Let's talk about the women who tried to speak up in Hollywood and were told to sit down and be quiet. Let's talk about actors of color who were passed over for roles while you and your buddies congratulated yourselves on your diversity initiatives. The studio fell into absolute silence. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. This had moved far beyond the boundaries of typical late-night television into something raw and personal. Damon's hands were visibly shaking with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about, Damon snapped. You sit behind this desk and make jokes for a living, okay? And you think that gives you the moral authority to lecture people who actually work in the industry you're mocking, okay? Work in the industry. Colbert's voice dripped with disdain. You mean the industry where you've repeatedly shown you don't understand your own privilege, where you've consistently demonstrated that when it comes to real social issues, you'd rather protect your comfort than do what's right. That's enough, Damon said, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. He started to stand, but Colbert wasn't finished. We're just getting started, Matt. See, here's what I find fascinating about guys like you. You built these carefully crafted public personas. You hire teams of publicists to manage your image, and then when someone calls you out on your actual behavior, you act like you're the victim. Damon was fully on his feet now, his face flushed with anger. You want to know what's fascinating? A guy who built his career mocking politicians for hypocrisy, and now you're sitting here doing the exact same thing. You're using your platform to bully a guest. Can you think wrapping it in jokes and self-righteousness makes it acceptable? The accusation hit Colbert like a physical blow. For a brief moment, his carefully maintained composure slipped, and something ugly flashed across his face. Bully, I'm holding you accountable. No, Damon said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally had enough. You're grandstanding. You're using me as a prop in whatever personal vendetta you're working through, and you're doing it in front of a live audience, because you know I can't really fight back without looking like the bad guy. The truth of the statement hung in the air. Colbert's smile vanished, replaced by something harder and more desperate. Maybe the reason you can't fight back is because deep down you know I'm right. Or maybe, Damon said quietly, his voice deadly calm, the reason you're doing this is because deep down you know you're exactly the kind of person you claim to be fighting against. The word struck Colbert like a slap. His carefully constructed television persona crumbled in real time, replaced by something raw and wounded. The studio audience collectively held its breath, sensing they were witnessing something that would be replayed and analyzed for years. "How dare you?" Colbert hissed, his voice barely under control. "How dare you sit there and try to turn this around on me? I've spent my entire career speaking truth to power, holding people accountable for their actions and their words. Have you?" Damon challenged, stepping closer to the desk. "Or have you spent your career hiding behind comedy so you can say whatever you want without consequences? At least when I screw up, I don't pretend it's in service of some higher cause." The brutal honesty drained the room of air. Colbert's face went pale, his hands gripping the edge of the desk until his knuckles turned white. "You don't know anything about what I've sacrificed for this show, for this platform?" "Sacrificed?" Damon laughed bitterly. "You mean sacrificing basic human decency? Sacrificing the trust your guests place in you when they come on your show? Sacrificing your integrity for ratings? Don't you dare talk to me about integrity." Colbert shot back, his voice rising toward a shout. "You're a Hollywood actor who's made millions playing pretend while real people deal with the consequences of the systems you've helped perpetuate. And you're a talk show host who's made millions pretending to care about those same people," Damon fired back, "while you sit in a comfortable studio making jokes about their pain." Damon fired back without missing a beat. "At least I don't pretend my job makes me morally superior to everyone else." The exchange had grown so heated that security guards began moving closer to the stage, unsure whether they should intervene. The show's director frantically weighed whether to cut to commercial or let the train wreck continue. Colbert stood up behind his desk, his face flushed with anger. "You want to know what's really going on here, Matt? You can't handle being called out. You've spent so long as Hollywood's golden boy that you've forgotten what real criticism feels like." "Real criticism?" Damon replied incredulously. "This isn't criticism, Stephen. This is a public execution disguised as an interview. You didn't bring me here to have a conversation. You brought me here to humiliate me for your audience's entertainment." "Maybe that's what you deserve," Colbert said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and even Colbert seemed stunned by his own honesty. Damon stared at him for a long moment, the anger in his eyes giving way to disappointment. There it is. The truth finally comes out. This was never about accountability or social justice or any of the righteous causes you've been hiding behind. This was about you wanting to tear someone down because it makes you feel powerful. "It's not," Colbert began, but Damon cut him off. "No, let me finish, because this is important. You've built your entire brand on being the guy who stands up to bullies, who fights for the little guy, who calls out hypocrisy wherever he sees it. But right now, in this moment, you are the bully. You are the hypocrite, and everyone in this room can see it." The studio was so quiet that the whirring of cameras was audible as they captured every second of the confrontation. Several audience members pulled out their phones, instinctively recording what they knew was a career-defining moment for both men. Colbert's mouth opened and closed several times, as if searching for words that wouldn't come. For the first time since the interview began, he seemed genuinely at a loss. The righteous anger that had driven him evaporated, leaving behind something smaller and more pathetic. "You know what the really sad part is?" Damon continued, his voice now tinged with genuine sadness. "I used to respect you. I used to think You were one of the good ones, someone who used their platform responsibly, who understood the power they had and wielded it carefully. I am, Colbert tried to say, but his voice cracked. No, you're not, Damon replied. You're just another entertainer, drunk on your own self-importance. You convinced yourself that because people laugh at your jokes and applaud your monologues, that makes you a moral authority. But authority without compassion isn't leadership. It's tyranny with better ratings. The words seemed to physically stagger Colbert. He sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older and smaller than he had at the start of the show. The confident host who had begun the confrontation was gone, replaced by someone lost and confused. I never meant for it to go this far, Colbert said quietly, though it wasn't clear whether he was speaking to Damon, the audience, or himself. Damon studied him for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but final. But you did mean it, Stephen. Maybe not consciously, but you walked into this interview intending to humiliate me. You had your talking points ready, your moral high ground staked out, and your audience primed for a show. The studio remained frozen in stunned silence as Damon straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera. To everyone watching at home, remember what you just witnessed. This is what happens when someone becomes so convinced of their own righteousness that they forget basic human decency. This is what happens when entertainment becomes more important than integrity. He turned back to Colbert, still slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. I came here tonight to talk about a movie I'm proud of, to connect with people who might enjoy it. Instead, I was ambushed by someone who decided that destroying me publicly would make for good television. Please, Colbert began, his voice barely above a whisper. No, Damon said firmly. You had your chance to have a real conversation. You chose to turn this into a spectacle instead, and now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. The actor started toward the edge of the stage, then stopped and turned back one last time. You know what's really tragic about this? You actually had the power to do something meaningful tonight. You could have asked tough questions while still treating me like a human being. You could have held me accountable without humiliating me. But you chose the easy path, the one that gets the most attention, generates the most social media buzz, and creates the most viral moments. As Colbert finally looked up, and there was something broken in his eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing. No, you didn't, Damon replied quietly. You thought you were doing the entertaining thing, and that's the problem. You've been playing a character for so long that you've forgotten where the performance ends and the person begins. The audience watched in stunned fascination as Damon reached the edge of the stage. A few people began to applaud, uncertain how to respond, but he raised a hand to stop them. Don't applaud this. There's nothing entertaining about what just happened here. This was a failure of basic human decency, and we should all be embarrassed that it happened. With that, he walked off the stage, leaving Colbert alone behind his desk. The host sat motionless for what felt like an eternity, staring down at his hands as the cameras continued to roll. The audience didn't know whether to clap, boo, or quietly leave. Finally, one of the show's producers rushed onto the stage and whispered urgently in Colbert's ear. He nodded numbly and looked up at the main camera. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a commercial break, he said, his voice hollow and mechanical. When we come back, we'll have music from our musical guest. As the cameras cut away and the audience murmured among themselves, everyone knew what they had just witnessed would overshadow the rest of the show. Social media was already erupting with clips and commentary. Celebrity colleagues began choosing sides. Industry insiders debated whether Colbert had finally gone too far in his pursuit of viral moments. Backstage, Damon was already heading for the exit, declining interview requests from entertainment reporters who had somehow appeared in the hallway. His publicists fielded calls from major news outlets, all seeking statements about what had become the most talked about late-night television moment in years. The show continued after the commercial break. Colbert seemed diminished. His jokes landed flat, his energy felt forced, and the musical guests performed to a noticeably subdued audience. When the credits rolled, the host skipped his usual post-show wave and banter, simply walking off the stage and leaving behind a studio full of people who knew they had witnessed something unforgettable. In the days that followed, the confrontation dominated entertainment news. Ratings for Colbert's show fell as advertisers pulled support and A-list celebrities declined booking requests. Industry veterans spoke publicly about the importance of treating guests with respect, regardless of past controversies. Matt Damon, meanwhile, received an outpouring of support from colleagues who praised his composure under fire and his willingness to call out unprofessional behavior. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing entertainment value over basic human decency, and a reminder that even in celebrity culture, there are lines that should not be crossed. What began as an interview ended as a reckoning, not just for the two men involved, but for an entire industry that had grown too comfortable with cruelty disguised as entertainment.